All right, welcome back to DecisionWise podcast. This is the one where Christian and I hang out together and we talk about what I call culture builders. These are people that use people and people strategy to win, and to win in business, or to win at whatever their organization's missions might be if they're a nonprofit. I refer you to our last podcast, which was on Shake Shack and Danny Meyer, and we kind of highlighted how his skill at creating really an exceptional culture has led to a really thriving and successful business at Shake Shack. Today, Christian and I are going to chat about Alan Mulally. He was a well-known and well-beloved CEO of Ford, and we're going to talk about how he was a culture builder and how he was a leader focused on people's success. So let me jump in and kind of give his bio so that those listening will have a sense of kind of Alan's accomplishments. He was the former CEO of Ford Motor Company. He retired at July 1st of 2014. And prior to that, he was an outsider, one of the first outsiders to come from a motorsport or motor manufacturing, automobile manufacturing background. He was a VP of Boeing and the CEO of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. He's a Midwesterner. He grew up in Lawrence, Kansas, and he has master's degrees in aeronautical engineering and in management from MIT. And one note that I'll throw out there is that he was heavily mentored by his parents, particularly his mother. She's kind of that quintessential Midwestern mom that sort of instilled in Alan, and he credits a lot of what he did as a leader to the sayings and to the values that she gave him. So we'll jump in and look at his legacy. So one of the great stories that I came across was he talked about how his mom would continually have affirmations or positive sayings that she would give him each day. And one of those was that the purpose of life is to love and be loved, but that the first part of that sentence was more important. And she would ask him that on an almost regular basis, almost on a daily basis, instilling in him the importance of these relationships. From that, he went on to adopt a continuous improvement mindset in both his life and his business, and a mindset about working together.
And I think, if I could just jump in, I think that's a really interesting combination, because here, someone with a background in engineering, and you think of an engineer, if you're stereotyping, they're not always the most loving and caring. It's very much the cold efficiency and cutting out waste and things like that. And that's all very important. But to see just this lesson he learned from his mother, purpose of life is to love and to be loved. And then to read and learn about Alan Mulally and his approach to leadership, you really see that. And I think the combination is really powerful. This efficiency, I want to understand how things work and make them work better. The engineering and process improvement, continuous improvement side, but also the humanity and people first kind of way he led is just fascinating. And to see that in Alan, but also other leaders that come from an operations or engineering backgrounds, the ones that have been really successful, I think, combine that people and culture side with the engineering and kind of mechanical excellence.
You're right. I mean, one thing's clear. He didn't let the engineering side leave. I mean, he was careful at following the plan. He was careful at understanding the complexity associated with running a big multinational organization, but he didn't forget the people part.
Right. He's an easy person to look up to in terms of finding great success and doing it in ways that you could really admire.
One of the things I liked about him was he was true to what made sense for him. There's a story he shared where, as he was increasing his leadership responsibilities and moving up the ladder, he tried to be command and control. And it was hard for him, and he was lamenting at one time, and a chief pilot at Boeing came to him and said, "Be who you are." And he realized he was more about inclusion and cooperation and working together than he was about sort of mandating the process and kind of shepherding people along. He shared that with his CEO, who became his backer and said, "Yeah, I trust you. And I'm going to back the fact that you're going to run things differently than others." And he said that made a huge difference.
Yeah, that's great.
He talked about nurturing the culture. You know, we see that all the time, don't we? Nurturing the culture.
Right. Instead of letting culture be an afterthought or a byproduct of just letting it happen passively, but to actively tune it and nurture it. And I think that goes back to our conversation we had around Shake Shack and the way that they found success through a leader who tuned or nurtured that culture. We see the same thing with Alan.
Right. And I think he realized the leader set the tone, and they have to walk the walk, and they have to care about it. You just can't do lip service. You have to kind of live these traits, whether that's humility or this commitment to working together.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the fascinating things about a culture is there's so many factors that contribute to it. Every day, every person and every aspect of an environment creates and co-creates a culture, and is influenced by a culture and reinforces a culture. And all of us play a role in shaping that. But there's some things that can only be influenced at the top. And the gravity of the behaviors, the actions, the attitudes at the top carry so much more weight than, let's say, someone at the individual contributor role, new hire. Even though we all have an influence there, the tone at the top is so important. I think this is a really great case study in what's possible there.
Yeah, I really like that point, that if you want to put true emphasis on your culture, if it comes from the top, you're going to get that buy-in.
Yep.
So he decided to put on one slide, he called it one slide to say it all, 11 points. And these were expected behaviors. And what I appreciate about this approach is, instead of trying to describe a big, long strategic vision plan or this end state of what Ford might look like in 20 years, he said, I'm going to tell you what I want to see happen around here. I want to tell you how I need you to treat each other. And if you do these things, then we're going to see success. Success will follow from our commitment to these 11 points. So, Chris, you want to walk us through these 11 points?
Yeah. I'll walk through them, and we can add some comments after the fact. People first. Everyone is included.
Yeah, number 2, everyone's included. But people first, right? That the most important thing is, if you're going to set about building a people culture, that's probably needs to be the number one thing on the list.
And also something that you can, if it's not happening, you see and feel very quickly. If a lot of times we hear leaders say people first, but their actions don't reflect that, and they don't reinforce that and encourage it throughout the organization. Everyone is included. We're better together. That concept, compelling vision, comprehensive strategy, and relentless implementation. A lot packed into that one, but a clear, we're going somewhere together, and everything is aligned to help us get there.
Well, and that really is part of number 5, which is one plan and clear performance goals. Like his items 3, 4, and 5 all sort of roll in together, which is, I'm going to lay out for you exactly where we want to go, and I need you to all work together to get there.
There's really no substitute for that. We see, when we work with organizations, we see a lot of times where there's great culture, happy, talented people, but if there's not a plan, people feel that, and it just detracts. There's no way to overcome it. Well, if there's not a clear place where we're headed together, the work loses its meaning, and people just kind of are confused and don't know where to put their efforts.
Now, it was important to have it be one plan, because before he got to Ford, it didn't seem like everyone was aligned. And certainly what was happening, say, in Australia wasn't going to be the same that was happening in North America. And he wanted one plan for the entire Ford organization.
There's a great book, and Matt, I know you've read up a lot on Alan and Ford. And one of the books I read was American Icon, and it is a great read. Highly recommend it. But from my own experience as an organizational development consultant, as I read it and just kind of read about the pre-Allen state of the culture, and it's not, I don't think, completely unique to Ford, but Ford is a great example of a culture that wasn't necessarily aligned for some great things and some toxic aspects of the culture. My physical reaction was stress. When I thought, okay, if I'm going into an environment like that, just the stress of trying to change the status quo, it was pretty incredible, because there was a lot of things headed in perhaps the wrong direction when he got there. And so the idea that, these are the elements he used to tune that culture and to turn things around, pretty impressive. The next one, facts and data. One thing I picked up from watching great leaders is the best leaders face hard truths. and it's not what I want to hear, but what's the truth, facts and data, things that aren't manipulated, that we're not just using to push an agenda. What's the truth? Matt, you going back to that one plan, everyone knows the plan, the status and the areas that we need special attention.
In 8 and 9 and 10, he kind of gets to how they treat each other. So 8 is propose a plan, but and be positive, find a way attitude. Number 9, respect, listen, help, and appreciate each other. 10 is emotional resilience and trust the process. So in 8, 9, and 10, he kind of says, look, I need you to be committed. I need you to be a cheerful soldier sometimes, and committed to helping us make forward what I know it can become and what we know it can become.
And then I love this last one on these 11 points. Have fun, enjoy the journey and each other. In that book that I read, and the other things I've picked up about Alan Mulally is that he enjoyed it. I mentioned that it seemed like for me, just the stress of trying to turn something that massive around. You got the sense throughout that entire journey that he enjoyed working with people. He enjoyed getting to know people, even though the personalities might even sound abrasive that he was encountering. He seemed to enjoy the elements that he could from that, and that's contagious. People pick up on that and get excited as well.
He has a contagious, vivacious, sort of warm personality. When you hear him talk, I encourage you to listen to other podcasts. He draws you in and makes you believe, and that's refreshing. I'll tell you, I wanted to share kind of the famous story that comes out of the color-coded charts that we've heard about. So they needed a lot. I mean, it's a complex process to build automobiles, and he had come from a place where they built planes, and he said upwards of 4 million parts might be used in building a plane. He said, but they had complex charts to track what was happening and to organizationally keep their hands in understanding what was happening at Ford. And he said he had this coding process that he wanted to use. One was it would be marked green if it were on plan, yellow if there was an issue but a solution had been identified, or red if there was an issue but there was no solution yet. And so he explained the color coding process, and he gets back all of his charts from his reports. And he says, I was surprised to see the charts all green in color. And then he said, look, our organization is forecasted to lose $17 billion this year. He said, how can that be possible, right? How can everything be green if we're forecasted to lose $17 billion? So eventually, Mark Fields, one of his leaders, came forward, who actually ended up becoming CEO of Ford after Alan. He was the first to put some red on his chart. It was a problem with a production issue, a particular vehicle, and Mulally started to clap. And he said people are looking around going, why is this guy clapping? Some thought that maybe the clapping was a signal to have security come in and have Mark fired. But instead, he wasn't fired. He was celebrated, and Mulally treated the production issue as a rallying point. And he said in the following week, there were 320 charts, but they were rainbow charts because people realized that they could tell the truth and that they were going to be rewarded for that and not punished.
That's that tone at the top, creating safety. Look, hey, we're gonna face these things head on. We want the truth. We don't want you to, but where before it was a culture of, oh, you don't show red in this meeting, it's green.
He made a comment that just resonated with me. He said, people are not the red, they are the answer. The issue is the red, and the reds are the gems. You have a saying around here that you sometimes say.
Well, yeah, it comes from, kind of that operations background or that supply chain or quality mindset. That the statement that I picked up from that world is treasure your defects. And that's a really interesting thing to bake into a culture, that when something goes wrong, we don't try to sweep it under the rug or hide it, but to really understand it and learn from it. And I think Alan brought that in spades to the culture that he created at Boeing and Ford and I would imagine elsewhere.
It's interesting. This really fits in with what you and I are passionate about, what we do, which is at DecisionWise, we are really trying to help people understand where there are some reds. You know,
Right.
like we're not trying to give a positive scorecard. We're trying to empower leaders with areas that they can address. And if leaders, we know that if they take our survey data and don't see it as it's a problem, but accept it and treasure those defects, they can get better.
I was presenting to an organization just last week, and I was presenting to leaders of different levels, and one thing I said there, and I've been saying with other groups lately, is my hope is that you don't see this. You know, we're presenting survey results, and so there are green and red items in the survey, and the statement I've been using is, I hope you don't see this as a report card or a scorecard. I hope you see this as a tool to improve the experience of your employees, and that's a very different way to look at the same report. Is this something that's being done to me that I've got to reframe in a positive way for my own political advantage, or is this some information I can use to improve an experience or improve some aspect of our organization?
Just imagine if we were with a group of leaders, and that CEO, you know, didn't take these as report cards on his leaders, but he said, okay, here we go. We're in it together. Yeah, there's going to be some challenges in your department, but let's get busy identifying the solution and move forward. And, you know, I think so often we don't get the value out of the surveys we run for them, and it's frustrating to us.
Yeah.
Because if they could just use it as a tool, as you said, I think they would plow forward and find the solutions they want. And instead, they obfuscate and kind of hide.
Well, you know, an interesting scenario or place that I've been in several times is we'll run a survey for an organization and then present it to the leadership, and then we'll also, for one reason or another, present it to their board. And usually the CEO is involved. And so to see as the CEO approach in that board setting, where there's a level of accountability and just a different power dynamic with the CEO, being accountable to a board, and seeing how different CEOs handle that, and whether he or she tries to explain it away or minimize some of the lower scores, or really just opens it up and says, look at this is an opportunity for us to address this. And it's just a really fascinating learning for me, just to see how people approach that in that particular scenario. And I have to think Alan would face that head on in any scenario.
Well, I'll just comment that when he arrived, he had a 42% positive score on his employee surveys, and when he left, he was very proud that was 91%.
That's impressive.
And that is 8 years, so that didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And that's our message to our clients. But with consistent work and continuing to survey and listen, you'll get there.
It's a journey, yeah. Incremental improvement year after year, and that's what we see here. I imagine it was a significant step every year to get to that 91%.
So I'm going to share with you kind of my key takeaway, and then I'll let you kind of have the last word. My key takeaway is, I loved, again, and I mentioned this when we were introducing his slide to say it all, his one slide. I loved how his 11 points were behaviorally focused, because I think we know what that means. We can spot good behavior, and we know what bad behavior is. I think biologically and through evolution as a species, that's us, right? We have pro-social behavior and we're against antisocial behavior. I like how he described it, because it makes it digestible, and people know what it means to have, they know what it is to have a positive attitude and why that's important. So that's my takeaway, is that he didn't just kind of paint a rosy picture but not explain how to get there. He said, no, this is what I want you to do. I want to see happening. What was your big takeaway, you think?
Well, I just think how impressive it is to see a strong leader without ego. Because I don't think he could have done the things he did at Ford if it felt inauthentic, or if trying to do some self-serving things for his own brand or anything like that. But to go in without ego and to really build an organization and a culture for all the right reasons, I don't know if the impressive things that he did were possible any other way. In fact, the part of the stress I felt as I read the book was, this is a monumental task ahead of this individual. There's no way for him to accomplish the things that need to be done, and he did it, and it's an impressive case study that I think about frequently, and I also wonder if I would be looking forward to the new Ford Bronco if Ford hadn't had such a positive culture change, so many years ago. I think they're still realizing the benefits of one man, and obviously, Mark Fields and many other, I think, are to be commended too in terms of being brave and in standing up to improve a culture. But it's very impressive.
Yeah. Well, I love talking about these culture builders. We love talking about this with our podcast listeners. We encourage you to stay tuned for our next one, where we're always on a hunt to find these leaders that we think do it right, and that's what we want to highlight and talk about. It's been fun today. And to learn more about us and what we do, please visit us at DecisionWise.com. Thanks, everybody.